Session 8, January 26, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner, I have a question about what I call the advertising of the Confederation. It has to do with free will. There have been certain contacts allowed, as I understand, by the Council, but this is limited because of free will of those who are not oriented in such a way that they could maybe want contact. This material that we are doing now will be disseminated. Dissemination of this material will be dependent upon the wants of a relatively small number of people on the planet. Many people on the planet now want this material. They will not be aware it is available. Is there any possibility of creating some effect which I would call advertising, or is this against the principle of free will? Ra, I am Ra. Consider, if you will, the path your life experience complex has taken. Consider the coincidences and odd circumstances by which one thing flowed to the next. Consider this well. Each entity will receive the opportunity that each needs. This information source beingness does not have uses in the life experience complex of each of those among your peoples who seek. Thus, the advertisement is general and not designed to indicate the searching out of any particular material, but only to suggest the noumenal aspect of the illusion. Questioner, there was a portion of the material yesterday which I will read where you say, there is a certain amount of landing taking place. Some of these landings are your own peoples, some are the entities known to you as the group of Orion. My first question is, what did you mean by the landings of your peoples? Ra, I am Ra. Your peoples have, at this time space present, the technological advancement, if you would call it that, of being able to create and fly the shape and type of craft known to you as an unidentified flying objects. Unfortunately for the social memory complex vibratory rate of your peoples, these devices are not intended for the use of mankind, but for potential destructive use. This further muddles the vibratory nexus of your social memory complex, causing a situation whereby neither those oriented towards serving others nor those oriented towards serving self can gain the energy power which opens the gates to intelligent infinity for the social memory complex. This in turn causes the harvest to be small. Questioner, are these craft that are of our people from what we call planes that are not incarnate at this time? Where are they based? Ra, I am Ra. These of which we spoke are of third density and are part of the so-called military complex of various of your people's societal divisions or structures. The bases are varied. There are bases, as you would call them, undersea in your southern waters near the Bahamas, as well as in your Pacific seas in various places close to your Chilean borders on the water. There are bases upon your moon, as you call this satellite, which are at this time being reworked. There are bases which move about your lands. There are bases, if you would call them that, in your skies. These are the bases of your peoples, very numerous and, as we have said, potentially destructive. Questioner, where do the people who operate these craft come from? Are they affiliated with any nation on earth? What is their source? Ra, these people come from the same place as you or I. They come from the Creator. As you intend the question, in its shallower aspect, these people are those in your and other selves' governments responsible for what you would call term national security. Questioner, am I to understand then that the United States has these craft in undersea bases? Ra, I am Ra. You are correct. Questioner, how did the United States learn of the technology to build these land inaudible? Ra, I am Ra. There was a mind-body-spirit complex known to your people by the vibratory sound complex, Nicola. This entity departed the illusion and the papers containing the necessary understandings that were taken by mind-body-spirit complexes serving your security of national divisional complex. Thus, your people became privy to the basic technology. In the case of those mind-body-spirit complexes, which you call Russians, the technology was given from one of the Confederation in an attempt approximately 27 of your years ago to share information and bring about peace among your peoples. The entities giving this information were in error, but we did many things at the end of this cycle in attempts to aid your harvest, from which we have learned the folly of certain types of aid. This is a contributing factor to our more cautious approach at this date, and your people's call is greater and greater. Questioner, I'm puzzled by this craft that we have undersea bases for. They are inaudible. Is this technology sufficient to overshadow all other armaments? Do we have just the ability to fly in these craft, or are there any weapons like there are? Were they given to us inaudible, or are they just craft for transport? What is the basic mechanism of their inaudible? It's really hard to believe, is what I'm saying. Ra. I am Ra. The craft are perhaps misnamed in some instances. It would be more appropriate to consider them as weaponry. The energy used is that of the field of electromagnetic energy which polarizes the Earth's sphere. The weaponry is one of two basic kinds. That which is called by your peoples psychotronic, and that which is called by your peoples particle beam. The amount of destruction which is contained in this technology is considerable, and the weapons have been used in many cases to alter weather patterns and to enhance the vibratory change which engulfs your planet at this time. Questioner: how have they been able to keep this a secret? Why aren't these craft in use for transport? Ra. The governments of each of your societal division illusions desire to refrain from publicity so that the surprise may be retained in case of hostile action from what your peoples call enemies. Questioner: how many of these craft does the United States have? Ra. I am Ra. The United States has 573 at this time. They are in the process of adding to this number. Questioner: what is the maximum speed of one of these craft? Ra. I am Ra. The maximum speed of these craft is equal to the Earth energy squared. This field varies. The limit is approximately 1/2 the light speed, as you would call it. This is due to imperfections in design. Questioner: wouldn't this type of craft totally solve or come close to solving a lot of the energy problems as far as transport goes that we're used to transporting inaudible? Ra. I am Ra. The technology your peoples possess at this time is capable of resolving each and every limitation which plagues your social memory complex at this present nexus of experience. However, the concerns of some of your beings with distortions towards what you would call powerful energy cause these solutions to be withheld until the solutions are so needed that those with the distortion can then become further distorted in the direction of power. Questioner: at the time you mentioned that some of the landings were of our peoples. You also mentioned that some were of the Orion group. We talked a little bit about the Orion group, but why do the Orion group land here? What is their purpose? Ra. I am Ra. Their purpose is conquest. Unlike those of the Confederation who wait for the calling, the so-called Orion groups call itself to conquest. Questioner: specifically, what do they do when they land? Ra. There are two types of landings. In the first, entities among your peoples are taken on their craft and programmed for future use. There are 2 or 3 levels of programming. First, the level that will be discovered by those who do research. Second, a triggering program. Third, a second and most deep triggering program crystallizing the entity, thereby rendering it lifeless and useful as a kind of beacon. This is a form of landing. The second form is that of landing beneath the Earth's crust, which is entered from water. Again, in the general area of your South American and Caribbean areas and close to the so-called Northern Pole, the bases of these people are underground. Questioner: what do the Orion group have? What's the objective with respect to the conquest of the Orion group? Ra. I am Ra. As we have said previously, their objective is to locate certain mind-body-spirit complexes which vibrate in resonance with their own vibrational complex, then to enslave the unelite, as you may call those who are not of the Orion vibration. Was the landing at Pascagoula in 1973 when Charlie Hickson was taken on board this type of landing? Ra. I am Ra. The landing of which you speak was what you would call an anomaly. It was neither the Orion influence nor our peoples in thought form, but rather a planetary entity of your own vibration which came through quarantine in all innocence in a random landing. Questioner: what did they do to Charlie Hickson when they took him on board? Ra. I am Ra. They used his mind-body-spirit complex's life experience, concentrating upon the experience of the complexes of what you call war. Questioner: how did they use them? Ra. I am Ra. The use of experience is to learn. Consider a race who watches a movie. It experiences a story and identifies with the feelings, perceptions, and experience of the hero. Questioner: was Charlie Hickson originally of the same social memory complex as the ones who picked him up? Ra. I am Ra. This entity of vibratory sound complex did not have a connection with those who used him. Questioner. Did those who used him use his war experiences to learn more of the Law of One? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner. Were the entities that picked him, is that the normal configuration of these entities? They, inaudible. Rather unusual. Ra. I am Ra. The configuration of their beings is their normal configuration. The unusualness is not remarkable. We ourselves, when we choose a mission among your peoples, needed to study your peoples, for had we arrived in no other form than our own, we would have been perceived as light. Questioner. Well, what density did the entities who picked up Charlie Hickson come from? What was their density? Ra. I am Ra. The entities in whom you show such interest are third density beings of a fairly high order. We should express the understanding to you that these entities would not have used the mind-body-spirit complex, Charlie, except for the resolve of this entity before incarnation to be of service. Questioner. What was the home or origin of the entities that took Charlie? Ra. I am Ra. These entities are of the Sirius galaxy. Questioner. The most startling information that you've given me, which I must admit I'm having difficulty believing, is that the United States has 573 craft like you describe. How many people in our government are aware that we have these? How many total people of United States designation are aware of this, including those who operate the craft? Ra. I am Ra. The number of your peoples varies, for there are needs to communicate at this particular time-space nexus so that the number is expanding at this time. The approximate number is 1500. It is only approximate, for as your illusory time-space continuum moves from present to present at this nexus, many are learning. Questioner. Where are these craft constructed? Ra. These craft are constructed one by one in two locations, in the desert or arid regions of your so-called New Mexico, and in the desert or arid regions of your so-called Mexico, both installations being under the ground. Questioner. Do you say the United States actually has a manufacturing plant in Mexico? Ra. I am Ra. I spoke thusly. May I, at this time, reiterate that this type of information is very shallow and of no particular consequence compared to the study of the Law of One. However, we carefully watch these developments in hopes that your peoples are able to be harvested in peace. Questioner. I'm totally aware how this line of questioning is of no consequence at all. But this particular information is so startling to me that it makes me question your validity on this. Up until this point, I was in agreement with everything. This is very startling, and it does not seem possible that this secret could have been kept 27 years and that we are operating these craft. I apologize for my attitude, but I thought I would be very honest about this. It is unbelievable to me that we would operate a plant in Mexico, outside of the United States, to build these craft. Maybe I'm mistaken. These craft are physical craft built by our physical people. I could go get in one and ride in one. Is that correct? Ra. I am Ra. This is incorrect. You could not ride one. The United States, as you call your society divisional complex, creates these as a type of weapon. Questioner. There are no occupants then? No pilot, shall I say? Ra. I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner. How are they controlled? Ra. I am Ra. They are controlled by a computer from a remote source of data. Questioner. Why do we have a plant in Mexico? Ra. I am Ra. The necessity is both for dryness of the ground and for a near total lack of population. Therefore, your so-called government and the so-called government of your neighboring geographical vicinity arranged for an underground installation. The government officials who agreed did not know the use to which their land would be put, but thought it a governmental research installation for use in what you would call bacteriological warfare. Questioner. Is this the type of craft that Dan Fry was transported in? Ra. I am Ra. The one known as Daniel was in thought form transported by Confederation thought form vehicular illusion in order to give this mind-body-spirit complex data so that we might see how this type of contact aided your people in the uncovering of the intelligent infinity behind the illusion of limits. Questioner. Would it be possible for any of us to have some type of contact with the Confederation in a more direct way? Ra. I am Ra. In observing the distortions of those who underwent this experiential sequence, we decided to gradually back off, shall I say, from direct contact in thought form. The least distortion seems to be available in mind-to-mind communication. Therefore, the request to be taken abroad is not one we care to comply with. You are most valuable in your present orientation. Questioner. The reason that I have questioned you so much upon the craft by which you say the United States government operates is that if we include this in the book, it will create numerous problems. It is something that I am considering leaving out of this book entirely, or I am even going to have to question you in considerable detail about it. It's difficult to even question in this area, but I would like to maybe ask a few more questions about it, with still the possible option of leaving it out of the book. What are the diameter of these craft the United States inaudible? Ra. I am Ra. I suggest that this will be the last question for this session. We will speak as you deem fit in further sessions, asking you to be guided by your own discernment only. May we ask at this time if you have a needed short query before we end this session? Questioner. Is there anything we can do to make this instrument more comfortable? Ra. I am Ra. The instrument is well balanced. It is possible to make small corrections in the configuration of the spine of the instrument that it be straighter. Consider also to carefully monitor the placement and orientation of the symbols used. This particular session the sensor is slightly off and therefore the instrument will experience a slight discomfort. Questioner. Is the sensor off with respect to angle or with respect to lateral displacement? Ra. There is an approximate 3-degree displacement from proper perpendicularity. Ra. I am Ra. I leave you in the love light and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, in rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator. Adonai.